Hi folks, it's Duncan and I'm making this film about my book, The Answer. And the reason is, well, there's lots of compelling reasons to make a book about the answer. But I'm going to start off with with the true story. The reality is that I um, created this book, Good Being the Meaning of Life Engine, the owner's manual for love, life and livelihood. It took me years to write Good Being. And it was a project that was very close to my heart. And I launched it in Santa Barbara on Easter Sunday, 2023, which is hard to believe is exactly more or less 3 years ago. And when I came back, I was quite excited, but I found there was two really big bits of news around about that time, which more or less made Good Being obsolete when just after I'd written it. And the reason that was, obviously that was quite crushing because you spend a long time writing a book. That was volume one of 3 volumes. It was approximately 120,000 words. And, um, and I knew deep down in my heart, without going into what the big news was, but mainly it was to do with AI. Um, and I knew I hadn't really properly tackled the subject, and I went back to the drawing board. I depublished the book on Amazon and Smashwords and various other platforms that I was using, and I got stuck into writing a new book, the son of or daughter of Good Being. And I've ended up creating the answer. Now, the answer is, in my humble opinion, everything that Good Being wasn't. Now, Good Being was a lot of things. Um, Came up with some really interesting ideas. But there's a little anecdote that I want to share, and I hope if Chris Evans ever watches this video, he doesn't take offence because it's not intended to offend him. Um, but when we got back from the United States, Easter 2023, I we stayed with friends near Henley on Thames, very long-standing, very special friends, and on the Saturday morning, we we were going shopping, and we were clothes shopping. My wife Karen had a new job to prepare for. Very exciting times, and my plan was that I thought we'd go shopping in the morning and be able to go to Marlow in the afternoon, where I know there's a really lovely um, Marlow Bar and Grill, which I've been to a number of times over the years. Lovely restaurant, brasserie. Make the most of the opportunity to use it whilst we were down south from our home in the Highlands of Scotland. And um, and then I was convinced that I would be able to get my new book, Good Being, on Chris Evans' radar. Chris Evans, the radio DJ, on his radar, because I knew it was kind of float his boat. I thought it'd be really something that he'd be very interested in. And we didn't get there on the Saturday. Um, Other things happened, and I was a bit disgruntled, if I'm honest. But Sunday morning, my very special friend said, "So what are you going to get up to today, Duncan?" I said, "We're going to go to Marlow to meet Chris Evans." And she went, you know, one of those noises. And Karen, my wife, made a similar dismissive noise as well. So anyway, around about, I don't know, 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, we left the countryside not far from Henley, drove through the back lanes and along the side of the River Thames, approaching Marlow, came into Marlow High Street from the west. We approached a very old medieval cross, which is at the top of the high street. And Karen said, Duncan, you're not going to believe it. And lo and behold, standing on the island in the middle of the road to our right, in the road that we were just about to turn into, crossing the road, is the inimitable Chris Evans, Virgin Radio DJ, who I've been listening to for many years. And I've noticed him watched him unfurling in terms of his interests in personal development, well-being, health, etc., etc. Quite a key subject for him, often discussed on his shows. So Karen said, get out, get out, get out. So as soon as we could find a space to park the car, which we couldn't, so I had to jump out of the car on a busy high street Sunday morning. And I thought I'd have a few minutes to compose myself. But obviously, being a celebrity, Chris had phoned ahead to Gail's Delicatessen, I think it was, and had ordered it in advance. And basically, before I know it, here's Chris walking down the pavement towards me. And I didn't, well, what am I going to do? Check my hair out, I haven't got a speech ready. And I proceeded to say, hi, Chris, hope you don't mind me interrupting your Sunday morning. My name's Duncan. I live in the Highlands of Scotland, just in town for a day or so. Love to get my new book onto your radar because I think it would. And basically, I was mumbling and tongue-tied and nervous and made a hash of it. And Chris said, bless him, he said, you all right, man? And I said, well, I'll be honest with you, Chris, I'm a wee bit nervous because this seems almost otherworldly if I told you how our meeting had come about. I didn't really have time to bore him with the detail of that. But he said, give me a hug. And I thought, well, that's very charming of him. So I gave him a hug. He had his arms full of pastries and coffees and such like. And how long are you down for? He said. And I said, well, I'm here till Monday or till Tuesday. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll get my manager to give you a ring. Have you got a card? And I said, yeah, I've got a card. Shove it in my pocket. So I felt a little bit unusual as I kind of tried to get no, don't put it in my hoodie pocket. Put it in my trouser pocket so I don't lose it. I'll keep it. I'll make sure I get it later. And I left it at that. Said thanks very much. I don't think I've ever really experienced a sense of what one might call stage fright. But if there ever was an episode in my life, then that was it. And I made a pig's ear of trying to engage with this celebrity DJ who I thought might be able to influence my book. So when I got home, I was still quite excited about the opportunity. Didn't hear from the manager. And then a few weeks went by. So I thought what I'll do is I'll print off a special version of an early version of the book, packaged it up as beautifully as I could, and with a bow and with nice raffia, whatever. I went completely overboard and sent it in and never heard. And I still haven't heard. But there's a positive spin on this because I would have thought that Chris Evans would be a pretty studious and committed reader of books. I know he is because I've heard the way he kind of devours books the day before his guests come on the show. So I know he's an avid reader. Where I was left was that I appreciated that my book hadn't hit the spot. So I knew I had to go back to the drawing board. And if you are watching this, Chris, I think I owe you a bit of a debt of gratitude because what the answer has, but good being did not, is this. And I'm flicking through the pages, trying to find it. It doesn't have the good being, meaning of life engine described like that. That is as a result of rejection from, hypothetically, from Chris Evans. So this gut, heart, mind idea. In the middle, we have the tiny cog. And the reason I can now speak really proudly is because I've created something which is deeply meaningful. And I know it's an absolutely ludicrous claim for any one person to say they might have cracked the code of the meaning of life. But I've been doing this work for approaching, well, I qualified as a career guidance practitioner in July 1997, but I trained, I did a year's postgrad 95, 96, and from 1996 I worked as a probationary careers advisor in Staines in Middlesex, in 4 or 5 different schools, working with hundreds and hundreds of young people poised to enter the world of work or go into further education or higher education. So this is 30 years I've been doing this job. And I've been freelancing as a redundancy counsellor, as an outplacement consultant, as a career guidance practitioner, as an executive coach, as a talent management consultant, as an organizational development consultant, a change agent helping organizations face change. I've done large scale recruitment process outsourcing projects for organizations like Transport for London as they built up the staffing levels ahead of the London Olympics in 2012. And I'm pretty well qualified to have an opinion on the subject of career strategy, career guidance, career development, vocational guidance, which is probably my preferred word. I think there's a big, very important and significant difference between vocation and career. Career is a collection of different jobs. Vocation is an occupational identity which tends to stay with us over the long haul of our working lives. And there are a couple of things I really want to emphasize in this shortish video. One of the things is that 90% of the people I meet in that, or have met in that 30-year period, are in the wrong job or not engaged by their work. And that's sad and bad. Not just for the individual, but it's a big loss for society as well. And then a few years ago, I started to ask all my clients, we have a 2-hour meeting to start usually, which might seem like a stretch, like an onerous slog, but in actual fact, the 2 hours tends to vanish in a flash. But I say, okay, this first 2 hours is not the important bit. It's the 24 hours after our first meeting, which counts the most. This is the time where you pluck down from the ether your the parts of the conversation and you pluck them down and you gather them into your notepad, which I'm an avid journal keeper, journal taker. And then you reflect and you bring what you've reflected upon to the next meeting, which is a really good launch pad, a building block for us to step into meeting number 2 and build momentum, generate momentum and build our progress going forward. But I'd like you to consider something else, please. When you get up in the morning, when you're in the bathroom, you're putting your lipstick on, having a shave, brushing your teeth, whatever it is you're doing. I'd like you to stare back at the person staring opposite you in the reflection of the mirror and tell that person that you love them unconditionally and come back to me for meeting number 2 and let me know how you get on. So a week passes, I come back for meeting number 2, we have an introductory sort of briefing about what we're going to discuss today. I manage expectations, I raise or lower expectations according to how I can deliver or not deliver. But then I come to what I call the acid test, which is how did we get on? telling the person staring back at you from the mirror that you love them? And the answer is 90% of the people I meet, it's just exactly the same statistic as the amount of people I meet who are in the wrong job or not engaged by their work. 90% of the people say, I can't do that. It's just too weird. It seems almost perverse. It really makes me uncomfortable. It feels like I shouldn't be doing it. It feels like all of my conditioning has told me I'm not to do that. It feels like I would be egocentric or conceited if I said that I love myself. So I never really thought this is quite a big statistic until about 4 or 5 years ago, in the lead up to writing that first book there, Good Being. I realized that these two statistics, 90%, go hand in glove. They're the same statistic. And I went, it was a bit of an Archimedes eureka moment. And I went, all right, well, that's too similar to be coincidence. What does it mean? And I think what it tends to mean is that if we don't love ourselves enough, satisfactorily, in a healthy way, to give ourselves a sense of vocation and a sense of really positive contribution of the attributes and the qualities and the talents and the gifts that we hold within each of us, if we don't believe we can direct those things towards meaningful work and therefore derive improved self-esteem from that transaction, I'll go into this in the book, it's called The Invisible Transaction of Work, then why bother? And the reason that people tend not to bother is because so many people have this comparatively lowly sense of positive self-regard. Think about that. Just think about that for a moment. So, without wanting to make lots of people sad, people who know us closely know that we lost a child in 2014, and the lights went out in my world. My wife came very close to dying as well. I felt very responsible. It was a child that we tried for 10 years, and we lost him in a pretty horrific and harrowing circumstances on his due date after a delight-filled 40-week pregnancy. And the aftermath of that was made so much more complex, unnecessarily complicated, because there was a cover-up. I will argue that until the day I die. The medical negligence situation was exacerbated and increased our kind of pain seismically. But the point I make there is I hit rock bottom. I went from delight to despair, the stratosphere of delight to the absolute darkest depths of despair in a flash. And a big part of my recovery was, apart from the fact I really, really did not think I could go on as a person. I thought the scale, the magnitude of my personal failure in not being able to advocate successfully for my unborn son and my beautiful wife was so crushing that I really couldn't see myself in my future. And I'm sure you know what I'm implying there. But against all odds, I mean, seriously, on a miraculous level, we had another seismic, very, very graphic miscarriage in the year after. But then, having been told that we would never have children, this amazing little person arrived in our life, our son Dylan, who will be 10 in December 2026. And 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 if ever there was a kind of cure-all, a panacea, it has to be that example of that little parcel of miraculous good fortune occurring in our life. It was literally like a lightning bolt of ecstasy had struck. And when it strikes a person, when that person's really, really, really low, it can take some serious processing to kind of really appreciate fully the scale of what's occurred. And some people might not want to watch this film because of me waxing so lyrically about the the majesty of becoming a parent, the privilege of becoming a parent, especially as an old man. I wanted to have children far younger in my life, but due to whatever circumstances occurred, I am an older dad. Anyway, the point being, I knew I had a responsibility to leave the world better than the version I entered. I think it's a responsibility that falls upon the shoulders of all adults in this world. And that's in the book as well, that responsibility. So I undertook to write my way back from oblivion, the oblivion that I found myself in having lost Dirk, and to try and generate a positive legacy for Dylan, the son who came into our lives in December 2016. And in the midst of all of this, I had this amazing meeting with a Professor Richard Vincent, who was a Professor Emeritus at Sussex University, who's an internationally renowned cardiologist. And I was on a train journey with him. I had the distinct privilege of walking to a meeting with him, to an event, and walking back to the train station, and then a bit more time on the train on the way back to Brighton, where we used to live. And during that time, I asked if he placed any stock in the diagnosis known as broken heart syndrome. And he said, "Of course I do, Duncan. I think I know the Japanese cardiologist who discovered it." And without going into too much detail, I felt that my heart was broken and my world had kind of caved in, and within the implosion, I kind of lost all hope of being able to see my way through to recovery. So this must have been 2015-ish, before Dylan arrived. And on the back of the conversation I had with Richard, I married that with a lot of my experience as to when I meet people who are what one might describe as broken. When I meet them when they're freshly redundant, when their world's been turned upside down, when they've arguably lost so much hope because they've lost their identity, because they've lost their job, because they've lost a way of keeping a roof over their head, they too could be, to whatever shade or degree, brokenhearted. And when I kept in touch with Richard, and we had a number of conversations, and one of the things I realised was that I asked him, did he have any? I had this hypothesis that the human heart was a love-generating engine, and that our role in life was to activate that engine and to contribute good as a result of our caring about ourselves, caring about the role that we play in society, and caring about the good that we contribute as a result of our vocation. And he said, "Of course, Duncan." He said, "First and foremost, what you need to understand is that the cardiologist is an electrical mechanical engineer, and that the heart is an electrical generating machine, and that the human being operates on electricity. That's pretty much how we communicate through our nervous system." And that was really interesting. So he's kind of giving me some sort of sense of affirmation about my embryonic hypothesis. So I I came home and I rang up another Richard, who's much more skeptical of my enthusiasm. Another Richard who I spent many days as a swimming colleague in the local swimming pool where I used to swim. And Richard's PhD was why did Geiger counters work? So he was a physicist of some seniority and repute and great experience, and he was very dismissive. And then he said, I said to him, but surely when I meet people who are freshly redundant and kind of broken and depressed and down, there must be a kind of wavelength emitted from their functioning as a body, as a physical human body. And I said, and then if we track their progress and we get them to a point where they're upbeat and confident and more optimistic about life and maybe slotted into a vocation and they have a sense of purpose in life, then I would suspect they would have to emit a different energy. And there must be a differential in the wavelength and the frequency and the bandwidth of that and intensity of that signal that they emit. And he went, well, now you've got me, Duncan. He said, because it would be really difficult for me to argue against what you're discussing, although I'm not quite sure what instruments you would use to measure it. So it was a little bit of a ta-da moment. And I was like, whoa, this is fantastic. So I prepared a PhD proposal. A couple of my friends listened to me hypothesizing about this. And I said, I'd really love to turn this into a theory that the human being is a love-generating organism and that that's our role in life to contribute good, which is another word for love, through our ability to exercise whatever qualities and attributes and gifts and talents and knowledges and insights and patterns that we have experienced in our lives in a way that contributes and channels this love into something meaningful, driven by purpose, with a sense of conviction. And that's another story for another day as to where I'm at with regard to potentially going through a published PhD. But the point is this, and that's why I believe that this book is something genuinely worth looking at, because just to say I'm right, that the human being, the human organism, is a love-generating engine, and that our responsibility, if we have one responsibility in life, it is to turn ourselves on to what it is that we love about ourselves, what we love to do, what energizes us, what our vocational identity is, to look at the the life engine that exists in all of us. What are our curiosities? What intrigues us? What captures our attention? Look at the patterns that we've experienced as a result of our lived life and our insight that is derived from mistake making, which is where the law of adversity comes in. What errors have we made in our life? How do we detect those errors? And as Timothy Galway in his wonderful book, The Inner Game of Tennis, helped me understand is, in terms of knowledge of performance and knowledge of results, how do we interpret this feedback as this rich seam of self-knowledge that we can interrogate for who we are and amplify the results in terms of who we become, because the act of becoming is part of our responsibility in life. So there's probably lots of things that I've left out, and as is my wont, I tend to want to tell everybody the whole story and the whole kind of all of what there is to be excited about this book. But I think the last thing I want to say is that AI is coming, which is scary enough. But what's petrifying is AGI, or what the artificial intelligence boffins describe as the singularity. And there's all sorts of amazing good to be extracted from the power of artificial intelligence. I think breast cancer screening is a fabulous example as to the speed and reliability and rigor of diagnoses of incidence of breast cancer by itself is a fabulous example as to why and how artificial intelligence has got a huge amount to offer humanity. But the singularity is something else. And if people like Elon Musk, who are going to let loose, pardon me, multiple millions of robots, Optimus robots, whatever the Tesla robot is going to be called, um, that's millions of vocations will be eradicated. And there are a lot of people arguing with me that there will be an uptick in the amount of careers and occupations created by artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence. But what history tells us is that the time it takes to absorb a seismic shift in technological advancement leaves humans behind trying to adapt for at least a generation. So this is an opportunity. This isn't just a threat. We can turn this into an opportunity on a massive, inconceivably wonderful scale. Because if we can harness artificial intelligence to do good, to help us do good, that's great. But there's also this risk. And there's a serious number of extremely well qualified people out there have written the famous letters on AI and AGI that I write about in my blog. And we have to pay attention because we could be creating a nemesis, a competitor for fruition, human fruition. Now, my feelings are genuine that I think we all deserve to self-actualize in our life. We have a responsibility to self-actualize in our life. Maslow latterly changed his preference of description from self-actualization to full humanness. So we have this responsibility to achieve full humanness, which is to become a loving, giving, contributive, compassionate, benevolent person. And this is the kicker. The reason that society is fragmenting, fracturing, imploding, populism is on the increase, scapegoating is on the increase, and all of these negative factors of these schisms and divisions that are occurring in society. They are the net result of not enough people caring enough about themselves and what they do and how they contribute. So we could pivot on this opportunity to engineer, design, craft, sculpt, blueprint an incredibly positive civilization. I think we've really got to start having conversations about that because this is a pivot point. Either we have a cohesive society or a adhesive society. The choice is ours. And I believe my book genuinely helps show the way we need to go. Thank you.